is a fun little bird, the maroon oriole. This is the maroon oriole. It is found in several different areas of Asia, including places like India, over to Bangladesh and Bhutan, down all the way to Vietnam and Cambodia. Now, what's quite interesting is that depending on the location, the coloration of the males can vary quite widely, with the ones in more Southeast Asia having a much brighter red, whereas the one found more in the India subcontinent area have a much darker, more maroon color like this one over here. The males and the females also have a quite wide sexual dimorphism, with the males being a very striking black and red or maroon color, with the females and the immature males looking more like this, with a still kind of red undertail but a more brownish, grayish, and stripy color. The majority of the diet is made up of different types of fruits like figs, but is also supplemented with things like nectar and insects. Maroon orioles are not the most social of birds. They typically live alone or in pairs, with both parents working to build kind of those elaborate hanging nests that are common in multiple oriole species, as well as contributing equally to the childcare, raising, and feeding the chicks. Let's talk about the Garibaldi fish. This is the Garibaldi fish, also called the marine goldfish or the Catalina goldfish. It is a type of damselfish that is found in the Pacific Ocean, mostly around California and Baja California, and is actually the state fish of California. It gets the name Garibaldi after the historical figure Garibaldi, who was often noted as wearing a bright orangish, reddish, scarlet coat, which is similar to the color of this fish. However, that is only the adult fish who look exactly like that. The juvenile Garibaldi have that same bright orange coloration, but also a bunch of really, really bright blue dots on them, which is pretty cool. They are a pretty long-lived fish species, reaching maturity at around 5 years old, and with a average lifespan in the wild around 12 to 17 years, but the oldest recorded Garibaldi fish has lived over 50 years. So that makes it the longest lived species of damselfish, at least that we know of thus far, as well as the largest species of damselfish. They also have a good amount of sexual dimorphism, with the males being up to an inch longer than the females, which is unique in marine fish. Most of the time, tropical fish, females are larger than the males. Both the males and the females kind of aggressively defend their territory. However, the males are even more territorial during breeding season though, so that could play a part in the size difference. Garibaldi fish are typically omnivores, eating a lot of different things that they can get, including things like seaweed and algae, as well as marine invertebrates like worms and anemones, and occasionally, if necessary, their own eggs. Now, these guys aren't very commonly seen in aquariums due to the fact that they are protected in California, and it is illegal to catch or keep these fish in the state of California. Additionally, they're also apparently rather difficult to keep. Again, they are quite large, typically reaching around 35.5 centimeters or around 14 inches long. And as they get older, apparently they tend to be more aggressive towards other types of fish, so they can't really be kept in like community aquariums, and again, also have very specific needs. I would also like to give a shout out derogatory to this AI image I found when trying to research what animals are orange for the Pride Week thing. We have such great specimens like ginger cat, copperhead worm, Julia butterfly, sea star, Garibaldi, shout out to that, cichlid, leopard gecko, cichlid, leopard gecko. AI is good and everyone should use it. Here is a really cool type of fungus, the mustard flower rust. This is mustard flower rust. In specific, it is that yellow stuff, because mustard flower rust is a parasitic fungus that infects plants. And honestly, it's got one of the coolest life cycles and behaviors that I've seen in a fungus in a long time. Basically, once a plant gets infected by the spores of the flower rust, the rust does a lot of different things to the plant. After infecting the plant, it essentially sterilizes the plant and makes it unable to produce flowers of its own. Instead, it produces what are called pseudoflowers. So you can see here the kind of brownish greenish color, that is the normal part of the plant. And those bright yellow parts are the pseudoflowers produced by the fungus. And these pseudoflowers are basically the leaves of the original plant forced to grow into a pseudoflower shape instead of producing their own flowers with their own reproductive capabilities inside of it. Instead of producing things like seeds and pollen for the host plant, these pseudoflowers only produce fungal spores. And these pseudoflowers are actually incredibly attractive to different types of insects, which are responsible for spreading the fungal spores. Actually, this is a plant that I think is infected by the mustard flower rust that I actually found at the creek a couple months ago, and I picked it to put in my plant book because I thought that this was a cool type of new flower that I've never seen before. Turns out it is probably a type of regular plant that got infected by this mustard flower rust, and it turns out also that I am not smarter than an insect because I was also tricked by this into thinking that it was a regular flower. So in addition to looking like a flower under regular visible light spectrum like this, it looks very nice and bright and yellow, it also looks like a regular flower under ultraviolet, which is the kind of visual system that a lot of insects like bees use. So it looks like a regular flower to bees as well under a different type of light. But wait, there's more. It also apparently smells very good to insects. Not only does it mimic looking like a highly desirable flower in both visible and ultraviolet light, it also smells like a highly desirable flower, attracting even more insects. But wait, there's even more. The fungus, instead of allowing the host plant to produce regular nectar to feed the pollinators, it apparently also forces the host plant to make a sticky, sweet substance that is not actually regular plant nectar, but something similar enough that the pollinating insects can feed on it. So the pollinators actually get quite a benefit from visiting the mustard flower rust. The mustard flower rust gets its spores spread on, similar in a way to how pollen is spread, and the host plant is just kind of shit out of luck. Let's talk about green weaver ants, also known as green tree ants or just green ants. These are weaver ants. They are a type of ant that are found quite widely in several areas of Asia and Australia, all the way up from India over to the Philippines down to areas of Australia like Queensland and the Northern Territory. They are a very fascinating type of ant that exhibit some of the best teamwork of even other ant species that are well known for their teamwork. The queens are typically large and rather more green than the workers, and they are responsible for producing all of the larvae and eggs and such for the rest of the colony. Weaver ants are arboreal, meaning they spend all of their time pretty much in the tree canopy. They make their nests in the trees, they live and forage in the trees, and they rarely, if ever, go down to ground level. And weaver ant nests are some of the most intricate and well-designed ant nests of any species that we know of thus far. They also use that incredible teamwork in order to construct the nest. Basically, when a scout ant finds a suitable place to start a nest, they will call all of their buddies over, and they do this thing where some of the workers will grab the edges of the leaves, while other workers will stretch out and make a bridge in order to grab other neighboring leaves or the other side of that leaf. Once the leaf is held together by the workers, kind of acting basically as staples, holding the structure together in the way that they want, then other workers will start to glue it together. As you can see here are some of the workers holding two edges of leaves together. Then in order to glue it together, the other workers will go into the previous nesting area or wherever they're being stored and grab new larvae. And those larvae secrete a specific type of silk that is basically used as hot glue. The workers with the larva will take the larva and pass it around the edges of the leaves in order to bind them together so that the workers holding the leaves together can leave and go do other things. And the silken larva hot glue will hold that entire structure together, and that is basically the function of the larva until they mature into adult worker weaver ants. This is kind of what the more finished nest looks like. As you can see, it is very intricate, can get actually quite large, and can be repaired and replaced. As the leaves age and die, they can be removed and replaced with newer neighboring leaves in order to keep the structure sound. Weaver ants are also some of the best species at forming body bridges. That is basically as it sounds, where a number of different workers will kind of climb on top of each other and extend down in a large chain in order to do something like get from branch to branch or join together neighboring leaves that are a little bit too far apart for a smaller number of workers to join. And they can bridge actually quite large gaps using this specialized technique, and they are very, very good at it. A lot of the food that the weaver ants eat come from other insects. They will eat beetles, flies, a bunch of other stuff. However, they also tend to farm honeydew, a sweet secretion that is produced by things like scale insects or aphids. I've talked about it a little bit more in detail, but basically the ants, and not just weaver ants, many other ant species as well, will consume the very sweet secretions produced by those bugs and take them back to use further. So they are known to farm the aphids and the scale insects in order to harvest that honeydew, but they also do consume other types of foods like other insects. Weaver ants also do not sting. They do not have stingers. However, they do possess a kind of very painful bite. They can also be aggressive when provoked and also are capable of spraying formic acid, which sometimes they are known to spray directly into the site where they just bit, so that's insult to injury. However, they're not really considered deadly unless you have a known allergy to something like ant bites, when that could be a little bit more serious. But overall, they are typically considered to be rather harmless to humans and also have a very big ecological benefit in the areas that they are native to. They're also sometimes used as types of natural pest control, since they are very good at getting rid of any unwanted insects, so sometimes crops will intentionally kind of leave weaver ant nests where they are to help control pest insects. They're also typically rather aggressive toward other ant species, and so this makes them very good at kind of limiting the establishment of invasive ant species in the area that the weaver ants are also found in, which is always a good thing. So weaver ants, like pretty much every other ant species, are super cool, and one of my favorite ant species, even though I say this a lot because I really like ants. Welcome back to Endangered Species Spotlight. This week we are talking about the ultramarine lorikeet. This is the ultramarine lorikeet. It is a type of very small parrot that is only endemic to the Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. It is classified as being critically endangered, unfortunately, with a population of anywhere between 1,000 individuals to about 2,500 individuals. Now, there are a couple different threats facing the ultramarine lorikeet, the main one being the introduction of the invasive black rats to the island, which prey on the adult birds, the chicks, and the eggs directly, as well as habitat loss due to deforestation. This is also due to a number of different things, which includes things like clearing the forest for agriculture and cities and tourism, as well as accidental forest fires also decreasing the population. Since this bird does need forests for its natural habitat, the decrease of forests is also decreasing the population of the birds. As for conservation efforts, there aren't a whole lot of conservation efforts going on specifically to help the ultramarine lorikeet. They don't occur in any protected areas that we know of thus far, and there's not really any momentum in order to make a lot of the areas that they do live in protected as of now. Most of the conservation efforts are going towards eradicating the invasive black rats and ensuring that no more rats or other invasives are introduced to the island. Since the islands are decently popular for tourists, there are several ports in the various cities, and ports are an area of potential introduction for invasives, so there is a decent amount of monitoring happening at the port cities to make sure that there are no introduction of anything that could further harm the lorikeets, as well as the other animals that are native or endemic to the island. Welcome back to Endangered Species Spotlight. This week we are talking about the ultramarine lorikeet. This is the ultramarine lorikeet. It is a type of very small parrot that is only endemic to the Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. It is classified as being critically endangered, unfortunately, with a population of anywhere between 1,000 individuals to about 2,500 individuals. Now, there are a couple different threats facing the ultramarine lorikeet, the main one being the introduction of the invasive black rats to the island, which prey on the adult birds, the chicks, and the eggs directly, as well as habitat loss due to deforestation. This is also due to a number of different things, which includes things like clearing the forest for agriculture and cities and tourism, as well as accidental forest fires also decreasing the population. Since this bird does need forests for its natural habitat, the decrease of forests is also decreasing the population of the birds. As for conservation efforts, there aren't a whole lot of conservation efforts going on specifically to help the ultramarine lorikeet. They don't occur in any protected areas that we know of thus far, and there's not really any momentum in order to make a lot of the areas that they do live in protected as of now. Most of the conservation efforts are going towards eradicating the invasive black rats and ensuring that no more rats or other invasives are introduced to the island. Since the islands are decently popular for tourists, there are several ports in the various cities, and ports are an area of potential introduction for invasives, so there is a decent amount of monitoring happening at the port cities to make sure that there are no introduction of anything that could further harm the lorikeets, as well as the other animals that are native or endemic to the island. Here is a cool butterfly, the purple emperor. The purple emperor is a type of butterfly that is found quite widely in the more northern areas of Europe and Asia, all the way from the United Kingdom through Russia over down to China. Its preferred habitat is larger broadleaf forest, and the larvae feed a lot on those types of trees, specifically on different types of willows. One of the more notable features of the purple emperor is that very distinctive purple coloration. Now, what's interesting is these guys don't actually have any purple pigment on them, and in fact only look purple in certain lights. This is due to the fact that all of the purple is caused only by iridescence, and the actual wings themselves are a brownish orangish color. Both the adult male and females do have this bright purple iridescence. However, in some of the larger females, it is less notable to being almost non-existent. They also have quite an interesting and unique diet, different from many other types of butterflies. Instead of feeding on nectar, they feed on things like tree sap and honeydew secreted by things like aphids and scale insects, as well as less savory things, including but not limited to animal carcasses and dung. And apparently they enjoy carcasses so much that collectors wanting to find, some of these actually use animal carcasses to lure them down to be captured, and they are also rather fond of roadkill. Now, feeding on dung and carcasses and such is not a thing exclusive to purple emperor butterflies. In fact, many butterflies will do things like drink tears and blood and animal residues. But regardless, this is quite a fascinating feature of these really cool butterflies. Here's a neat type of fish, the pink mau. This is the pink mau fish. It is a type of reef fish that is found in several areas of the Pacific and also some areas of the Indian Ocean, being found typically around Australia, but also over to the Juan Fernandez Islands and Easter Island, and occasionally as far as Hawaii. Both the males and the females are kind of this orangish, purplish, pink color, with the males occasionally having different colored spots and patterns and ridges on them, with the females typically being an overall straight pink color. The pink mau is also what is called a protogynous hermaphrodite, meaning that they hatch out of eggs all female, then as needed will transform into males. And while juveniles are known and we know what they look like, juveniles are actually quite rare to see, indicating that these guys don't breed that often or have that many offspring. The majority of the diet of the pink mau comes from things like zooplankton, as well as small worms and crustaceans and other things. And while they are edible and sometimes locally considered quite the delicacy and good eating, they're not fished commercially that often. They're also not seen very often, if ever, in aquariums, largely because they are quite big for aquarium fish, typically being around 30-ish centimeters long, but reaching a maximum of around 50 centimeters long. And they are also social fish, meaning there has to be a bunch of them, with also very specific and hard to replicate diets. So all in all, a very cool fish, but not great for having as a pet, as far as I can tell. Let's talk about the Malagasy rainbow frog. This is the Malagasy rainbow frog. It is a type of frog that is endemic only to a small area in Madagascar. It is a burrowing frog, spending a lot of its time underground, but it is also capable of climbing trees, so is occasionally found up there as well. These guys are also quite small, with the females being slightly larger than the males, but still only maxing out at around 4 centimeters long total. The majority of their diet comes from small invertebrates like insects and mollusks that they can kind of scrounge up. Their preferred habitat is kind of more cool canyon areas. They don't do well in places that are super hot and super dry. They are unfortunately considered to be endangered. However, in somewhat recent times, they were switched from being critically endangered to just regular endangered when a larger population of them was found than previously thought, which is good. They used to be quite common in the pet trade, however, exporting any of them from Madagascar is now illegal, which is also helping the populations quite a lot.